I don't think it's for everyone. If you have a really complex product, PLG is going to be pretty hard. Also, startups in a space that's really nascent and there's not a lot of competition or education out there, it can also be tough to have a product sell itself. But I think there are so many flavors of product-led growth. There are trial experiences, demo environments that you make available, making the product more sticky, making sure users come back, make sure they use all the features available to them. Expanding use cases are also generally an area to invest in if you're not able to invest on the acquisition. There's always ways to think about the product doing more heavy lifting on the expansion side. They're already using your product. What's their next use case? What's the next thing that we want them to do in the product that could drive more revenue?
Welcome to the Product Weekend podcast with Brito, Moita and Tojal. We hope you enjoy.
Hello, my name is Moita, and today, together with Tojal, I'm pleased to welcome Franciska Dethlefsen to the Product Weekend podcast. In this insightful conversation, we talked about go-to-market, pricing strategies, building a career in growth, and we spent most of our time going into the nitty-gritty of the implementation of a new self-serve pricing plan at Amplitude, which happened just a couple months ago. If you've been following our show, you already know that we have the release notes at the end of the episode with a summary of the key insights, so you can go check that out first if you want to confirm if the episode makes sense for you. And you can also navigate to the parts you find most relevant using the timestamps. Nevertheless, I don't think you'll regret hearing the episode from start to finish. Now I leave you with Franciska, and I hope you enjoy the conversation as much as I did. Franciska, welcome to the Product Weekend podcast. It's great to have you here. We're really excited to know more about the pricing changes and more about PLG at Amplitude. Most of our listeners have probably heard about the company, so I think it's a very interesting conversation ahead. And thanks for coming. Before we get into the more product-related topics, something a bit more personal, what's a recent weekend that you really enjoyed?
Oh, that's a great question.
Starting tough.
Yeah. A few weeks back, I was in Argentina in a town called Bariloche. If anyone here is familiar. And I went on a long night's hike with my partner, and we went horseback riding one day, which is something I really enjoy. It's a really beautiful place, really magical. Almost started looking at real estate there, but it's way out of my budget. But I really fell in love with that place, and it was very magical.
Nice. Awesome. Sounds like a super cool weekend.
Yeah.
And can you also, before going into the details, can you give us a bit of an overview about your background? And most of our guests have been like product leaders, CPO kind of roles, but you coming more from a marketing background. Can you give us a brief introduction?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, before my career in marketing, I spent quite a few years in venture capital, both in New York and in Berlin. I'm originally from Denmark, grew up here. I'm home right now, but left 15 years ago, 12 years ago, many years ago, and have been traveling around ever since and working abroad. I accidentally landed a role as marketing lead in a data startup. They're called Snowplow, and I built the marketing function there from scratch, which taught me a lot about marketing and especially growth marketing and demand gen. And then I moved on to another data company, so found kind of my passion in data and analytics as a space and SaaS as a space as well. And then worked for that company for a while until we were snapped up by Amplitude. So Amplitude acquired the company I worked at called Iteratively. And since then, I've been at Amplitude with lots of different hats. So initially, I actually worked in the product team for over a year, first as a product manager, and also more in like a growth product role, and then eventually moved back into marketing to head up our growth marketing team. So today, my team is a hybrid. I have product managers in my team, and we work closely with engineers as well. But generally, my
Interesting.
team is set up across the customer journey with a focus on self-serve. So we have a team that's focused on driving acquisition. So we own our website and we see that as a product, also own our paid and organic channels. And then we have a retention pod that focuses on in-product engagement, activation, and adoption. So they work really closely again with our product teams on how do we drive adoption of new features, how do we improve the onboarding experience and our activation rates. And then we have a monetization pod that focuses on driving revenue. So now self-serve revenue, but also sales pipeline. So we're accountable not only for our self-serve plan number, but also driving expansion pipeline with our sales motion. And then we also have a small
Okay.
community pod that kind of sits across all those three pods, focusing on helping our customers get better at their job.
All right. Interesting. Just a small follow up on that part of the sales that you're supporting the sales
Mhm.
pipeline. How is that? Is like with the internal tools that the sales team have that you're developing those and making it smoother?
Yes, we focus on really product-led sales, driving land and expand revenue on top of our free plan and now our self-serve plan.
Mm.
So what that means is making sure that we have all the right entry points for customers
Right.
to hand raise or get aware of paid features that they might be interested in. It includes building product qualified account scores, PQA scores, which means these users in the product are doing these things in the product, which means that we think they're ready for a sales conversation. So we push those leads to our sales team, and then we use Amplitude for that actually, which is cool. And then
Right.
we pull a lot of data out of Amplitude and into Salesforce for our sales reps to understand what their accounts are doing in the product so they can follow up with the right accounts at the right time.
Okay. Cool. Sounds great. And still a bit about your background. You mentioned that you traveled around. I saw from your LinkedIn you were at least in Copenhagen, Malaysia, Dubai, US, Amsterdam. Maybe I'm missing some in the middle. But I'm curious, were these geographic moves somewhat intentional, or was it just opportunities that were popping up?
I would like to say it's all intentional and part of a big grand plan I have. It's pretty random. Early in my career, I was just jumping around from startup to startup and found opportunities there and learned a lot from that. My move to New York the first time about 8, 9 years ago, that was very intentional. I wanted to go to the US and I wanted to work in New
Right.
York and live in New York. But that's really the only deliberate move I've made based on the location.
All right. And also, you mentioned that your first role when you were acquired and you joined Amplitude was as a product manager. Was the first time that you had that title, or maybe the only time you had that title, right?
Only
And
time.
how did that happen? Like, why did you get into that position, and how did it go for you?
Yeah. How I landed there was really because of the acquisition. It was a product and tech acquisition, right? They were acquiring us pretty early. They wanted, or Amplitude wanted the tech, they wanted the people. And so the easiest place for me to land was as a PM, owning part of the product that we, or most of the product that we had been building, know, knowing most about the product and evolved my role a fair bit. Ended up being the PM for our developer experience and SDKs. So learned a lot about product management, how product teams work together, how everything was set up at Amplitude. Also very quickly realized that I didn't want a career as a PM. And
And why was that? What were the things that you did not identify with? I think it's very interesting because we actually in the last episode we also had a bit of this conversation that a lot of people want to go to product and become product managers. It sounds cool, it's kind of trendy, but it's not for everyone, right? What were the things that were difficult, or that you didn't feel it was right for you?
Yeah, I think it's really hard because I think I just generally really comfortable in more of a growth role with some clear metrics. And I think as a PM in the kind of core product position I was in, it was really a lot about driving a roadmap forward and delivering features. It was especially hard because we were doing a big migration and joining two products into one, which is never easy. So that probably was a little bit discouraging. But generally, I think core product as it was for me back then, a bit too far removed from business metrics and maybe also a bit too slow moving from what I was used to. And then there is also just what I'm good at. And I feel way more comfortable and way more knowledgeable on the growth and the gross marketing side of the house.
Right.
So wanted to continue my career there. So it was partly some of those things I just mentioned, but also just like continuing a career path that has been going well
Yeah.
for me. And I've been lucky to land some good positions on that side. So just continuing there as opposed to starting not from scratch,
Some.
something relatively new. Yeah.
Do you consider yourself more like a more of a product person or a marketeer?
Can I be in the middle? I operate well in the middle. I think I have a strong product understanding. I like to wear my marketing hat and see the limitations and opportunities of both areas and really see how impactful and important it is when the two teams come together. So that's where I want to operate, where product and marketing are actually working collaboratively on growth, especially.
Cool. Another thing that's I found interesting on your profile and your background or your experience is that you were also doing some advisory work at some companies.
Mhm.
What does it consist of, and also how did you get started with that part?
How I got started was really random. The company iteratively that I worked for, the co-founders reached out to me and wanted my help and advice. And so I got into it accidentally because they were eager to get my help. So work with them, then eventually started working for them and saw that's a really good opportunity to manage my career for one. And then more startups approached me and wanted my help as well. Been close with various sort of angel investors and Series Seed and A VCs. So they are always looking for advisors for their startups in the growth space. And it's just really fun. My previous experiences have all been in startups and smaller companies in the early days, figuring out how you get from 0 to 1 and then from 1 to 10, and really found a sweet spot in kind of the data dev tool space where generally the founders are technical, they're extremely smart and capable, but they know nothing about go to market. And an easy win for both parties. I can bring a lot of knowledge to the table and they're eager to learn and take that and put it into action. So yeah, I've been doing that either through pure consulting or sweat equity and do a little bit of angel investing as well. So just trying to keep my ear to the ground and understand what's going on and also get pattern matching from all these different companies, what is working for them, what is not working for them, and build knowledge that way, which I really enjoy.
That's cool. That's super interesting. It's actually a topic that we could dive deeper into, but I think we're not gonna go there today. We have more
Up to you.
things. Yeah, I think our audience is more interested on the PLG side of things. So let's get into more details there.
Yeah.
So basically, for the context and how I reached out to you, you made a post on LinkedIn about the pricing changes and how excited you were about it, and that it was a process to change because even though Amplitude has been involved in these product-led growth conversations for quite some time, it was still a sales-led organization. And what were the problems that you identified with the sales-led approach that triggered you to do something about it?
Yeah. Yeah. It's been a long journey. I think it's something that I've been advocating for at Amplitude since I joined. I can talk a little bit about the main motivations behind the change. but we can also talk more about the journey itself and all the ups and downs we've been through over the years, because it's really been years in the making, and that's because it's really not an easy thing to do. I've been trying to research other companies that have done this in the past, and there's very few of them. I think MongoDB is another example. Sneak is another example. But usually when we talk about PLG, we talk about Calendly and Slack and Figma, and it just is so beautiful. Like, they found viral loops to get more and more users into the product. It's easy to use, it's self-serve, you get on your way, and then eventually you hit a limit in the self-serve plan, and then you have to talk to sales. And then these companies are really focused on layering on sales, and that's the struggle, if you will, or the challenge they're having, is to figure out where does sales fit in, and what role do they play. When it's the other way around, you're dealing with an existing go-to-market motion that generally will not want to share, or would not want to, at least up front, feel like this is a good change for them. So that's a little bit of context setting. But in terms of why, there's lots of reasons why. I think some of the main ones are we've been having a free plan for years now. It's been pretty generous, and we have tens of thousands of customers on that free plan, and they benefit from it. They love it. They use it, but they never pay us. And that's okay for some of them, but some of them should be starting to pay us when they get tons of value and have been using us for quite a while. So we had a paid plan that is our growth plan, is what we call it. But the step from paying 0 to paying 30K a year or more was quite the jump for our customers, especially smaller startups and SMBs that aren't ready to drop 30K a year, especially on a yearly contract as well. While we were landing lots of customers from our free experience, it has been for our startup and SMB space where we generate, if not 70% of our revenue in that space is from the product. We were just leaving a lot of opportunity on the floor, or in the free plan, if you will. So that was one. The other one was the perception in the market and the lack of transparency. A pricing page without pricing is not really a pricing page. And we were sensing and hearing in the market that Amplitude was starting to be perceived as expensive, enterprise solution, great platform, but not for smaller companies. And that was shocking to us. Sometimes you sit in your little echo chamber and you're like, Amplitude is for the small companies, and we do all this great stuff. We have our startup program, we have our free plan. But out in the market, there's a completely different perception of who we are and who we care about as well.
Yeah, actually, now that you mention it, in my first startup, where we were looking for a solution for data, and we were considering Amplitude, but then someone said, oh yeah, that's very cool, but it's very expensive. I think it's not worth it. I even went to the page, but there was no price, and I was like, okay, maybe I'll look for another option, and didn't even talk to sales. So yeah, that's
that is exactly what we were trying to fix. So making sure that we can change that perception, and also offer our customers an idea of what they will have to pay us over time, giving them that transparency and visibility, so it's not a shock, or you won't even get started at all because you think it's going to be too much. And then the last maybe thing to cover is also related to the other two, but we wanted to be able to compete in the startup and SMB space, and we have many competitors that are offering lower cost plans. And so we saw an opportunity for us to get in that segment as well, and make sure that we can compete where we need to. We have a strong conviction that a percentage of these customers that are getting started as small startups eventually become large modern enterprises, or whatever you want to call them. And so we want to be the first tool that they adopt, and we can grow with them, and we invest in them, they invest in us, and we'll be the platform that they will use for the long run.
So on that topic, I was reading some numbers, and apparently 50 to 60% of SaaS businesses reveal their price online, which means that we've out about 40%. So why do you think these companies don't share their prices? What are the reasons behind that?
Yeah, I my my view on that, or my experience with that, is having worked in several sales-led businesses, is that you want flexibility on pricing. And the easiest way to be able to test your pricing and aim high, go low, is by not offering that transparency.
Okay.
That gives your sales team free roam to go low if they think it's a small company that can't pay, or go really high if they think it's a big company and they can get away with it. Especially in times that are good economy wise, we can really get into that kind of oversell pattern that can be really dangerous, actually, once we hit hard times and need to focus on retention. So I think that's really it. The other, maybe adjacent to what I just said, is that once you put something in your site, on your site, that's what customers will anchor to. We're adding some risk to our sales conversations by adding a plan on our pricing page that starts at $49 a month. Now we've just anchored all our customers in a plan that's extremely cheap. And so I think lots of SaaS companies are not ready to have those kind of conversations about what plan is right for you.
Yeah.
Maybe there's lack of feature differentiation, lots of challenges there that's just much easier to hide from the customer.
Yeah, and going back to the challenges that you were mentioning in the part of perception, the fact that Amplitude was already involved in this product-led growth discussions and space for such a long time, really, and at the same time was still sales-led, do you think that was a problem in some way, that people were perceiving Amplitude as preaching the core but then not following, like just talking the talk without walking the walk?
I have never seen any customers complain about it or take note of it. I definitely felt it. I usually call us like product-led imposters, but I think PLG can take many shapes and fashions depending on the type of company. I would say we've always been partly a product growth company. We actually used to have a self-serve plan way back, and went after the enterprise, as lots of growing SaaS companies tend to do. But we always remained to have a free plan that was a huge part of our go-to-market motion. We weren't 100% imposters by any means, and I just saw it as a critical way to grow and be more efficient and make more revenue today and more revenue in the future. But there's probably some people out there saying, another imposter.
I guess that was probably more an internal thing, that you were working on these things and talking about it all day, and then, yeah, but we're not doing this. But yeah. And then let's get a bit more into details on how this happened and the process behind it. In a talk earlier this year, I believe you mentioned 3 aspects, like skills and tools, mindset, and strategy. Can you give us an overview of what those 3 aspects are, and which of those was the hardest to develop at Amplitude?
Yeah, I think you're pulling something from a presentation I did on PLG, where I took a post from John Cutler. Actually, he used to work at Amplitude. Honestly, I think the mindset has been the toughest one for us at Amplitude. And by mindset, I mean the change management that we've had to go through, and the amount of education we've had to do internally, to show leadership, prove out the business case for this, ensure that we're not going to cannibalize on our sales and motion, but that it's additive. We are a public company, which makes these kind of swings even more difficult, right? Risk aversion, goes up, I think, as you become a public company. And rightly that you gotta show markets that you're stable and a good investment. That was probably the hardest part for us at Amplitude. We have great tools and we have great people. So I think we knew what we needed to do. It was more about getting the whole company on the journey with us.
All right. And about the other two, so you talked mostly about the mindset, but about the skills and tools and the strategy. Can you also tell us a bit on how should a company think about these and develop those aspects as well?
Yeah, sure. It depends on where the company's at. We have all the tools and processes in place to make this a reality. So that was less important for us. I think the strategy, we had to come up with something that worked for Amplitude. And we spend a lot of time testing and iterating on a self-serve plan. We launched alpha versions, beta versions, almost launched in real life, went back to the drawing board. That kind of call that a strategy, but part of that is also just the tactics and how we went about it. We didn't just release something and
Yeah.
then call it a day. We really tested into it, and that also helped us on the mindset front, showing early results and signs of success and taking the business on a journey and this get them on board with this
Right.
strategy.
And how were those tests done? Like, what kind of things were you testing? Was it what was included? Was it also about pricing? How did you get these cohorts of testers, and how were you iterating on this?
Yeah. Our tests were fairly basic, but we tested a lot of different things. The first version of our self-serve plan we launched back in August last year, and there we launched with a new package that we'd come up with that was a uh, something we had conviction in from like a value staircase and a good, better, best perspective. And then we were only able to showcase it to a subset of users in the product. We had to exclude any kind of sales opportunities or sales leads or any accounts that sales would want to go after at a certain point. So it was a very limited exposure and we did
Right.
nothing to promote it. So all we did was just to put it in the product and see
Okay.
if anyone would buy it. And people did. People did buy it. We didn't promote it. We didn't talk about it. We didn't do anything. So that was the first kind of iteration where we could prove that if we did this, people would buy it. They didn't buy it at a high rate, right? Our
Yeah.
free to pay conversion rate was abysmal, but that's because we didn't invest in it. But we did put something out there and people wanted it. It's like a, if you can call it product market fit, but like we were trying to test if this is something that people would be willing to buy if it was available.
Right.
So that was the first iteration. Then our second iteration, we made it available to all customers in our product. But again, we didn't promote it or talk about it or really, do any kind of marketing of it. But here it was more of a goal to see how it would coexist with sales, right? Can we have this free plan or this self-serve plan in the product and sales still is creating sales pipeline and closing deals. And that was
So,
also a success. Yeah.
so if I understand correctly, that was like inside the product in the free version that you had like a pop up or whatever that people could see and click to get to the next level and to get access to more features.
Exactly. Yeah, we did some basic monetization awareness. So if you clicked into one of the paid features, we would show you that paid feature and then we would direct you to our pricing page where you could then actually check out and get to use that feature. So we did have some paid feature discovery in the product itself, but we didn't tell anyone about it. They had to go hunting themselves. And it was some customers did do that, and some customers you would ask them, do you know we have a self-serve plan? They wouldn't have any idea, but more
Yeah.
and more customers did become aware as they got more mature in the product and were interested in more paid features. And we could show that it didn't have any significant negative impact on our sales led motion.
Okay. And specifically, I don't know, this is the part where you can say you can go that deep into the process, but that's always a question. And I'm also in a SaaS business getting it started. So it's also a thing I have to think about recently is how do we get to the pricing, right? How do we get to the price of the plus plan? Because there's different things influencing the price. I don't know how much detail you can give on how did you guys arrive to that price, that specific price?
Yeah, I think so. There's a few things that we did. We wanted to make it super cheap and compelling as the entry point. Like we wanted to be able to have a plan that would fit almost any company's budget. So we wanted to anchor really low, and we also had a clear idea of our value metric. We price on monthly tracked users, and we were then able to take that value metric of monthly tracked users and make that a really small to fit that small price point that we have.
Okay.
And then from there, we wanted to build something that scales as the user scales their volume without, again, breaking the bank and with being competitive with other tools in the space. We're probably not the cheapest still, but we didn't want to. We don't want to compete necessarily on price. We think we have a really good product that fits the need, and we wanted to anchor it around price points that feel good for something that someone will put on a credit card self-serve. So that meant that we were operating in the $50 a month to about 30,000 a year.
Okay.
And then we looked at what features we were bringing into the plans and what we were going to give away for free versus our self-serve plan, and then run lots of numbers and analysis. But I don't think we over-indexed on the COGS part because we do have our free offering today, which does incur lots of COGS for us, right? Like we process, I don't know, billions of events and users through the free plan, and no one is paying us for that. But that's a customer acquisition cost that we gladly take because the future benefit of having those users for free. For the self-serve plan, we are thinking somewhat similarly that, and generally we have manageable COGS in that volume range anyway. So we were mostly focusing on value, willingness to pay, and how that relates to our value metric.
Okay.
I guess you don't yet have a full case study with all the details and the numbers on the impact that the change has. It was, 2-3 months ago?
Yeah,
Something
October
like that?
17th.
Okay, you still remember the date. At
Of
what
course.
time exactly was it live?
I think it was like at the midnight Pacific
Okay,
time.
okay, cool. Even the timing, amazing. But yeah, I wanted to ask you a bit what preliminary results or impact can you already see from this thing? And maybe before that, which are the success metrics that you have defined for this experience?
Yeah. The key metric we're looking at is our free to paid conversion rate. And we're looking at that in a cohorted way, 30 days and 90 days. And what we're seeing so far post-launch is that we're getting closer and closer to benchmark for free to paid conversion rate. Depending on where you look, we've done a lot of research on benchmarks across other SaaS businesses. And I think it goes as high as 5%, but that's more on the prosumer side. I think we're keen to get up towards 2 to 3%. Before launch, we were at, I don't even know, 0.0 something.
Because
and
before,
now,
sorry to interrupt,
Yeah.
but before you launched, this free to paid conversion was from free to enterprise level, right? And now you're
No,
measuring
yeah, it was actually
from free to...
for the beta version of the plan.
Okay,
So
okay,
what
okay,
was
okay.
live in the product without us saying anything about it. And, still very low conversion rate there. So we're getting close, if not actually hitting 1% right now, which is a really good place to be. We still have a lot of work to do. We want to get closer to 2 and 3%, but so close after launch, and that's a really promising sign. The other key things we look at, obviously, are the number of paying customers we have on the self-serve plan. We hit our goal for end of year last week. So that's been great.
Congrats.
So we have hundreds of customers already. I can't share specific numbers, I don't think, but really promising and early signs of success in this having product market fit. And then we measure, obviously, revenue as well. Revenue is still relatively low. We have surpassed 7 figures, but it's one enterprise still, right? Or 2 or 3, depending on the ACV there. So it's still small from a revenue perspective, but the amount of customers we're able to land is what's really, really promising here for us. Another metric that we're looking at closely is our churn rate as well. So with the self-serve plan, we also now are responsible for retention on that plan, retention and expansion. And with the low price point, month to month payment cycles, and teams just wanting to test out easily and then see if it's for them or not, we are seeing significantly higher churn rates than we do with our sales-led business, which is definitely expected. It's not a surprise
Yeah.
for us, but that's something we want to monitor and look at improving next year as well.
And do you also have any kind of counter metrics to make sure that this is not hurting the sales part, in the sense that eventually some of these clients go for this plan and they are happy with the plan, so they don't upgrade to an enterprise level? Do
Yeah.
you have any way to control that?
Absolutely. So the good thing is that my team is responsible for our self-serve number and our sales pipeline number. So we have to prioritize both and we have to make sure we meet targets on both. We actually were expecting about a 10 to 15% decrease in sales pipeline given the launch. That was what we said or build into our forecasting and assumptions in the SMB and commercial part of our business, not enterprises. We didn't really think it was going to impact there, but we actually not seeing that, at least not yet. Sales teams are still able to generate pipeline and close pipeline. The self-serve plan will come up in all sales conversations, but generally customers are pretty good at self-selecting into the plan they think works for them. And so that's something that we are really excited about seeing. And we have reached our self-serve target for this year, and we've reached our sales pipeline target for the product in this quarter as well. So we are able to do both at the same time.
Cool, amazing. All right, then let's start going to our last topic. We're already almost out of time. One thing I wanted to understand for anyone hearing this and they're thinking, okay, I don't have any product-led growth motion in my company. Is PLG something that every company should try, or it's not for everyone?
It's really a case by case. I don't think it's for everyone. If you have a really complex product that requires a lot of manual setup or education or custom implementation, PLG is going to be pretty hard. Also, for maybe younger companies or startups in a space that's really nascent and there's not a lot of competition or education out there, it can also be tough to have a product sell itself. It can be tough to get users into your product and have them activate by themselves. So building that funnel or journey through the product can be difficult. But I think there are so many flavors of product-led growth, and it's such a misused and overused term. But if you think about it from like a product doing more of the heavy lifting in the go-to-market motion, there's lots of things you can do. There are trial experiences, demo environments that you make available. There's a concerted effort to drive retention in the product, making the product more sticky, making sure users come back, make sure they use all the features available to them. Expanding use cases are also generally an area to invest in if you're not able to invest on the acquisition and entry point side. There's always ways to think about the product doing more heavy lifting on the expansion side. They're already using your product. What's their next use case? What's the next thing that we want them to do in the product that could drive more revenue and expansion through that?
Right. Now thinking about more product managers, and even though you haven't been a product manager for that long, you've worked with many product managers. How important do you think it is for a PM to understand marketing, sales, and growth? Not be so closed in the product world, but also understand how these other aspects of the business work.
Yeah, I think it's becoming really critical. I see successful PMs that are owning a revenue number, a customer count number, or adoption rate number. I think it's really important that PMs become more aware of the business side of the house, but also think about ways that they can contribute to that. Like growth is not a marketing problem. It's not a isolated growth problem. It's everyone's problem, or maybe not a problem, but everyone's challenge. And we all have to chip in. As a PM, how can you influence adoption rate? How can you influence retention? How can you influence monetization? Do you have a feature that you're responsible for that shows signs of stickiness or monetization? That's how I would think about someone's or my roadmap as a PM and prioritize my roadmap as well.
Okay, all right. Then let's jump to the sprint questions. So, as the name says, quick questions, short answers. Are you ready for it?
Mm-hmm.
First? Yeah?
Yeah,
Okay,
I'm ready.
let's go. One digital product that you would struggle to live without.
WhatsApp.
WhatsApp,
Right.
all right.
Good.
And what's the most underrated skill in product management?
Understanding business metrics and impact that your work has on those.
That's a cool one. Very much in line with what we've been discussing. And if you could shadow any product manager, or not necessarily product manager, maybe leader for a day, who would it be?
Ben Williams.
Ben Williams from Sneak, right?
He used to work at Sneak, yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Also, if you do shadow him for a day, then let me know. I'm also curious.
Hopefully he listens to this and
Maybe we should have him at some point.
you should, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Okay, then that's all for the questions. To wrap it up, let's just go over our release notes. So yeah, Tojal, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm just going to go over a few of the things we discussed just to sum it up. So in the beginning, we talked about career, and one thing I catch that you said was that there are many tech founders that are great technically, but they lack the go-to-market strategy and the knowledge about this strategy. So it's a great gap for someone that is a product person with marketing knowledge to fill. So it's a good opportunity for someone out there. Just pay close attention to that option, to that possibility. In terms of the pricing, you were saying that it's hard to, well, we expect that clients would move from free to paying, but it's really hard for that to happen naturally, especially when you're talking about moving from 0 to 30K, for example. For a small company, can be a big jump. And also there's a lack of transparency in pricing overall. And one of the reasons why you made this change was because you wanted to find a way to compete at a more medium range, to be able to serve a startup segment that you hope that eventually will grow and become bigger companies. So you're looking for this segment specifically as well in this transition. You were saying that one of the reasons why companies don't show prices, there are many, but one of them is really flexibility, to be able to go up and down when they need. But it's dangerous to be like that, because in times of uncertainty, retention can be hurt. And at the same time, companies sometimes do this because it's hard to come up with a plan that serves many clients with a fixed price. It's just easier to adapt and just change as needed instead of fixing it and then anchoring companies to that price. You also mentioned one of the hardest parts of moving to PLG is a change in mindset. So it's hard to show the whole organization that these moves make sense. Then it's not going to cannibalize the organization. So it's hard to change the people's minds. And it's also even more difficult when we're talking about the public traded company. So for all the companies out there, if you want to do it before that, it's a better idea. It's easier before. Okay. Then it's also, the process involves testing, and the way you did it was you test the self-serve plan in different stages. So first for a few users and the whole org, and you just see how if people were adhering to it without promoting it. One way to get to the price, when we discussed how do you get to that price, you said you wanted to have a price that is accessible to most startups. You have to look into to have a clear value metric. So it's important to have a value metric that is clear, that you know exactly what you're aiming for. Also, you have to look at your competition. Of course, you don't want to compete on price, but you have to be aware of what's going on with your competitors. And also, you have to consider the COGS, but don't over-index on that. So don't get too fixated on that, but also take that in consideration. Talking about the impact of this change, it's been 2 months, so there's not a lot of you can share still, but you already gave us a lot of numbers, which was interesting. The success metric you're using is the free to paid conversion rate, 30 days and 90 days. You said that the benchmark, the highest number, it's 5%, but it's really high. It's very rare to get there. So you're aiming to 2 to 3%. And right now you're hitting 1% when you started from zero something. So almost getting to 1%, which is really good with only 2 months rolling. Then you talked about churn. Now it's, of course, it's high as people are trying it. So people are just going in and trying it and leaving, just seeing if it's for them. It's expected to be high. It's of course higher than sales, but what you're trying to do is improve it next year. So that's something you're going to focus some more energy on that to improve the churn. Also, in terms of impact on sales, you haven't seen it, so it's not affecting the sales cycle, which is really important because you feel that people can self-direct at the right package. You were able to reach both the self-serve target and the sales target. And to finish, you mentioned that the most underrated skill for PMs is understanding business metrics. So I think that sums up perfectly what we talked about here.
And I think there's a lot of good insights on this episode for people listening. It's a good one. If you're confused with some of the metrics that we talked about, go back and listen again to improve your understanding of business metrics.
Exactly.
Cool. Franciska, thank you so much. Maybe just before we wrap up, how can people find you, and if they want to know the next chapter of this journey and what's going to happen next, how could they stay up to speed?
Yeah, I think the best and only way is probably through my LinkedIn. Feel free to connect and reach out if you have any questions. I should be more proactive posting about the progress of the new plan, but I'm too busy building it. But when I have some time, I'll be sure to share more about the progress and everything else. But yeah, do connect and reach out there.
Perfect.
All right. Amazing. Thank you so much. It was a great conversation, and thanks again for the time and availability.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the 7th episode of the Product Weekend podcast, and the first one of 2024. Happy New Year, by the way. I hope you found this conversation about PLG useful. If so, please follow the show and leave a rating on your favorite podcast app. It is a huge help for us to grow, reach more people, and bring you even more and better free content. We have 2 more guests coming up on our first season. We will have Afonso Malo Franco, product coach and advisor, and if you're Portuguese, you may also know him from a TV show. And we'll also have, to close the first season, the queen of PLG and master of growth memes, Leah Tarin. Stay tuned and see you on the next episode.